Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive.
Always. What are we digging into today?
Today, it's all about relationships, specifically those tricky red flags. Our listener wants to get a clearer picture of what really screams run.
Yeah, red flags. It can be
Okay.
tough, right? Sometimes so obvious, sometimes not so much.
Exactly. It's like, when is it a real red flag and when are we just overthinking things? For this deep dive, we've got a whole pile of articles, forum threads, even some expert opinions.
Sounds like we've got our work cut out for
We
us.
do. And speaking of red flags, one story from Good Therapy really stuck with me. It was about this woman, married, and her husband. Well, he was not exactly a prize.
What happened?
He was having multiple affairs, but even before that all came out, the red flags, they were waving like crazy. Late night calls he couldn't explain, missing their planned check-ins all the time.
Yikes, that's that's not good.
And it gets worse.
Yeah.
Get this. There was even a gift of women's lingerie that just magically appeared in his gym bag.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's pretty suspicious. No explanation for that one.
None whatsoever. And what struck me is how this story, and so many others like it, they all kind of point to the same thing. We often ignore these glaring red flags because deep down, we're scared. Scared of being alone, scared of rocking the boat, even if that boat is sinking.
It's easier to stay in a bad situation than face the unknown, right? Even when it's not good for us.
Exactly. And sometimes it's not just our own fears. There's societal pressure too. Like, there's this Reddit thread we found, and one commenter pointed out how the whole biological clock thing and this idea that there aren't enough good men out there.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
It puts so much pressure on people, especially women, to settle. Even if the warning signs are flashing, it's like better to have someone, anyone, than to be alone.
Yeah, that's a tough message to fight against.
It is. And sometimes those red flags, they're sneaky. They start small, almost like they're just quirks or, stress.
Yeah.
We found some articles from Psych Central and Better Up that talked about this. Red flags, they often escalate over time. What starts as a little annoyance.
Yeah, that makes sense. Little things turn into big things.
Exactly. And it's easy to dismiss them at first. But then down the road, bam, they're a huge problem.
So it's like what seems insignificant at first can actually be a sign of something bigger going on.
Precisely. And, red flags, they don't always scream and shout. Sometimes they whisper, and those whispers, they get louder over time.
Okay, I'm with you. So let's get down to it. What kind of red flags should people actually be looking out for? What are the big ones?
Well, controlling behavior is a major one, and that can show up in so many different ways. The Psych Central article, they mentioned a partner pushing you to move in together way too soon, or making big life decisions, changing careers, having kids, without even talking to you about it first.
So it's about respect, right? Respecting each other's choices and decisions.
Exactly. It's a lack of respect for your right to choose what happens in your own life.
And speaking of control, they also talked about isolating behavior.
Oh yeah, isolating someone from their friends and family, that's a big one. Huge. It's when someone tries to control who you see, where you go, what you wear, basically cutting you off from everyone else and making you depend on them.
It's a classic tactic for abusers, right? It makes you more vulnerable, less likely to leave.
Exactly. And this is why, recognizing emotional and mental abuse is crucial. This one article from Better Up really drove that home. They said emotional and mental abuse can be just as damaging as physical abuse, and it can even lead to PTSD. It's serious stuff.
PTSD from emotional abuse. Wow, I didn't realize.
Yeah, it's a real thing. And what's even more heartbreaking is that, well, that Reddit thread we mentioned, a lot of people were talking about how abusers are so good at manipulation.
It's almost like they turn things around on you.
Exactly. One commenter said their ex would twist everything, make them feel like they were the problem. They ended up apologizing for wanting basic respect. It's a messed up dynamic.
That's awful. Makes it so hard to see the red flags for what they are. So what can we do? How do we catch those red flags early?
Well, Better Up talked about yellow flags. It's like, they're not quite red flags, but...
More like warning signs, something to pay attention to.
Yeah, exactly. Like a red flag might be your partner forbidding you from going out without them. A yellow flag would be them getting sulky or angry when you do. It's subtle, but important.
I get it. Yellow flags are like, something's not quite right here. Not a deal breaker, but definitely worth a conversation.
Exactly. And this is where self-awareness and boundaries come in, right? Both Psych Central and Better Up, they talked about this a lot. Being clear about what you will and will not accept and communicating that to your partner.
So basically, knowing your worth, standing up for yourself.
Exactly. And one thing that really resonated with me from that Reddit discussion, it was this idea that sometimes we keep dating the same type of person over and over again. Even if it's toxic, it feels familiar.
Oh yeah, I've heard of that. Like we're drawn to what we know, even if it's bad for us. But why do we do that?
Well, a few comments mentioned unmet childhood needs. Basically, the idea is that if we had certain emotional needs that weren't met when we were younger, we might unconsciously look for partners who fulfill those needs as adults, even if it's in unhealthy ways.
Interesting. So it's like we're trying to fix something from our past, but maybe not going about it the right way.
Maybe, yeah. It's like trying to rewrite a familiar script, but hoping for a different ending. And sometimes that ending, well, it might not be what we're hoping for.
Okay, so we've talked about why people ignore red flags, but there's got to be more to it, right? What about the psychology behind all of this? Why do we do this to ourselves?
That's a great question. And that's exactly what we're going to explore next. We'll delve into the deeper psychological factors that play a role in us ignoring those warning signs. Because let's be honest, we've all been there.
It's like we have this inner voice, right? Screaming, danger, don't do it. But then there's that other part of us, the logical part, that tries to explain it all away.
Totally. It reminds me of those horror movies, the character's about to walk into a dark room and you're like, no, don't go in there. But they do anyway. They've convinced themselves it's nothing.
Exactly. And that good therapy article, remember? The woman with the cheating husband. She said she had this gut feeling something was wrong, but she just kept doubting herself, told herself she was being paranoid.
It's like it's easier to just pretend everything's fine than to face the truth.
Yeah, and avoiding that discomfort, that potential drama, well, that keeps us stuck sometimes, even when it's hurting us.
So how do we learn to listen to that gut feeling, that intuition?
I think it starts with self-awareness, paying attention to those little cues, those gut feelings, those times when you just feel hesitant, your body's trying to tell you something.
It's like becoming a detective looking for clues in our own lives.
Exactly. And journaling can really help with that. Writing things down can help us see patterns, understand our feelings better.
As we're talking about all this, I keep thinking about how this isn't just a personal thing. There's a societal piece to this puzzle, too. The Reddit thread really brought that home.
Oh, for sure. Lots of people were talking about how, especially for women, there's this pressure to be accommodating, to be forgiving, to put your partner's needs first, always.
Like we're supposed to smooth things over, avoid conflict, make excuses for bad behavior.
And those things, while they can be good qualities, they can also blind us to those red flags.
Exactly. We downplay them, tell ourselves it's not a big deal. But then those little things,
Yeah.
they can turn into big problems.
And sometimes those messages, those societal pressures, they're so ingrained, we don't even realize they're affecting us. It's like they're working on us subconsciously.
Okay, so we've talked about why people ignore red flags. Now, let's get practical. What can we actually do about them? Seeing them is one thing,
Yeah.
but actually taking action, that's tough.
Absolutely. It's one thing to notice the red flag, it's another to do something about it. That's where boundaries come in.
Boundaries, yeah. But that's easier said than done,
Yeah.
right? Especially if we're not used to standing up for ourselves, or if we're worried about how the other person's going to react.
Definitely takes practice. But those articles, Psych Central and Better Up, they had some good advice. They talked about clear communication, using I statements, focusing on specific behaviors, not just attacking the person.
Psych Central also talked about picking the right time and place for those tough conversations. Like, don't try to have a serious talk when you're both stressed out and exhausted.
Right. Make sure it's a calm and safe environment. You'll both be more open to actually hearing each other.
But what if, you've tried talking, you've tried setting boundaries, and nothing changes? A lot of people in that Reddit thread were talking about gaslighting. How some people twist things around, deny reality, make you question your own sanity. It can be so hard to break free from that.
That's why having a support system is so crucial. Talk to your friends, family, a therapist. They can help you see things more clearly, support you in making tough decisions.
Yeah, a lot of people on Reddit really emphasized getting professional help. They said sometimes you need more than just advice from friends. You need someone who can help you unpack those complicated emotions, those unhealthy patterns.
Therapy can be a game changer, right?
Yeah.
It helps you understand why you're attracted to certain types of people, why you might be missing those red flags.
It's like giving yourself the tools to build healthier relationships, to be the best version of yourself.
Exactly. And while therapy can help a lot, sometimes, even with all that support, a relationship just isn't gonna work.
It's true. And as hard as it is, sometimes walking away is the best thing for everyone involved. It's about loving and respecting yourself enough to know when it's time to move on.
Absolutely. And that can be an act of love, too, for both of you. It lets everyone find something that truly works for them.
It just occurred to me as we're talking about all this. These red flags, these boundaries, they're not just for romantic relationships, are they?
No, not at all. Friendships, family, even work relationships, those same principles apply.
The Better Up article actually talked about green flags, too. It's not just about avoiding the bad stuff. It's about recognizing the good signs, the things that make a relationship healthy.
Oh, I loved that part. They talked about open communication, respect, shared values, actually working through disagreements in a healthy way. It's about finding that solid foundation of trust and support.
And celebrating the good stuff.
Hmm.
It's easy to get caught up in the negative, but those positive aspects are so important, too.
For sure. It's about balance, right?
Yeah.
Being aware of potential problems, but also appreciating the good things and putting in the effort to make it work.
When I was reading that Reddit thread, one comment really stuck with me. It was about not blaming ourselves for ignoring red flags in the past. We all make mistakes. It's part of being human.
Absolutely. It's easy to beat ourselves up, but that doesn't help anyone. What matters is that we learn from it and make better choices in the future.
Which leads me to something I've been thinking about. What if the biggest red flags are actually within ourselves? What if those patterns we keep repeating, they're coming from our own unresolved issues?
Whoa, that's a deep thought. But it makes sense, right? Sometimes the most important work we can do is on ourselves. Figure out what's holding us back, what's making us attract those unhealthy dynamics.
It's like looking inward and asking, okay, what are my own red flags? What am I bringing to the table? And how can I work on those things to build healthier relationships?
Oh, love that. It's about taking responsibility for our own happiness and creating relationships that reflect our true worth.
It's like a journey, right? Of self-discovery and growth. And that journey, it can be tough sometimes, but it's so worth it.
You got it. It takes courage to be honest with ourselves, to face those uncomfortable truths. But when we do that work, the rewards are amazing. It opens us up to so much more love and connection.
And speaking of journeys and rewards, this conversation has been amazing. But I think it's time to shift gears a bit and talk about some final thoughts on red flags.
Through all this talk about red flags, one thing keeps popping up for me. It's trust. Trusting your gut.
That's so funny you say that because I was just thinking about the same thing. It's like deep down, we often know there's that little voice.
Right. It's like our internal compass.
Hmm.
Points us in the right direction, warns us when things are off.
Perfect analogy.
Yeah.
But the thing is, sometimes our compass it gets a little messed up.
Oh, absolutely. Past experiences, those beliefs we carry, insecurities, they can all throw us off. Makes it hard to trust what we feel.
So then how do we fix that compass? How do we
Right.
learn to trust that gut feeling again, especially if it's led us astray before?
Well, first, I think we got to admit intuition. It's not perfect. It's not like some magic power, always right.
So it's not about just blindly following every hunch we get?
Right. Think of it more like a muscle. It needs work. We have to train it.
Okay, I like that. Work that intuition muscle.
Yeah.
So how do we do that? What are some exercises for our intuition?
In that Reddit thread, they had some great tips. Mindfulness, they said. Meditation, journaling, all those things can help us become more self-aware.
And that self-awareness, that's key to strengthening that connection with our inner wisdom.
Exactly. It's about creating space to listen, to quiet the noise, all the distractions, and hear that inner voice. It might be quiet, but it usually knows what's up.
Thinking about it all, facing those red flags in others, in ourselves, it takes a lot of courage.
It really does. It's scary to admit the truth, especially when it hurts. Scary to set boundaries, to walk away from something that's not working, but
It's also incredibly empowering.
exactly. It's about breaking free from those old patterns, those beliefs that keep us stuck. That's where real growth happens in ourselves, in our relationship.
It's like the scariest things, they're often the things that make us stronger.
Well said. And when we're willing to be brave, to be vulnerable, to be honest, it opens up so many possibilities for deeper connections, for more love, for a life that truly feels good.
Okay, so before we wrap up, let's go back to our listeners' question. They want to know, what is a red flag, really? And I think we've covered so much ground here. We've looked at it from every angle.
Yeah, we have. And I think the bottom line is a red flag. It's anything that makes you feel bad, uncomfortable, disrespected, unsafe. Listen to your gut. If something feels off, it probably is.
It's not about being suspicious of everyone.
Mm.
It's about trusting ourselves, building that inner wisdom so we can create relationships that are good for us, relationships that lift us up, not drag us down.
Absolutely. Be open, be kind, but also be discerning. Protect your heart, know your worth.
Love that. Well, I think that about wraps up our deep dive for today. What a conversation.
Totally agree. It's been fantastic exploring all this with you.
And to our listener, we hope this has been helpful. Remember, dealing with red flags, it's a journey. It's a process. Be patient with yourself, trust your instincts, and never be afraid to ask for help.
And keep in mind, healthy relationships, they're worth the effort. They bring so much joy and richness to our lives.
Absolutely. So on that note, thanks for joining us for another deep dive. We'll catch you next time.